All right, let's get right into it. We are going deep inside the mind of one of history's most complicated rulers, Russia's very first Tsar, Ivan the Terrible. The question is, was this guy a complete madman, a political genius, or somehow both?
This is the thing that's so hard to wrap your head around with Ivan. He was a man of intense, almost fanatical religious belief who also dreamed up some of the most sadistic acts of cruelty you can imagine. He'd spend hours on his knees praying and then go personally watch his enemies get tortured. So how does that even work? How can you be a devout holy man and an absolute monster at the same time? That's what we're going to figure out.
Yeah, when you hear the name Ivan the Terrible, this is pretty much the guy you picture, right? A paranoid, all-powerful ruler staring out from the Kremlin with eyes that are just full of rage and suspicion. This is the man who created an entire system of absolute terror, all to cement his own power.
And his main tool for this? Something called the oprichna. Just try to imagine a secret state, a huge chunk of Russia's richest land that belonged only to Ivan. And it was run by his private army of thugs and executioners, the oprichniki. Think of them as the original secret police, and they answer to one man and one man alone.
And look, this wasn't just about brute force. It was pure psychological warfare. I mean, can you imagine? These guys rode black horses, wore all black, and had this symbol attached to their saddles, a severed dog's head, to sniff out traitors, and a broom to sweep them out of Russia. Just picture seeing that galloping toward your village. It was terror, pure and simple.
Okay, so how does someone become that? Where does that kind of cruelty come from? Well, to get Ivan the tyrant, you have to first understand Ivan the little boy. And believe me, his childhood wasn't about palaces and privilege. It was a straight-up horror show that planted the seeds for everything that came later.
Just look at this timeline. It's brutal. At 3 years old, he's technically the ruler of all Russia. By age 8, he's an orphan, and he has to watch as these powerful nobles, the boyars, just tear his kingdom apart for their own gain. I mean, they'd storm into his bedroom, steal from the palace, even let him and his brother go hungry. He learned a lesson, and he learned it the hard way. Power isn't just given to you, you have to take it. And at just 13, he took it. He ordered his guards to let the hunting dogs tear apart the most powerful boyar. That trauma, that moment, it shaped his entire world.
And you can just feel the anger in his own words years later. For Ivan, this wasn't politics. This was personal. This memory of being humiliated, of being scared and powerless, it just festered inside him. It created this lifelong obsession with absolutely crushing the same nobles who tormented him as a child. But here's the twist. It wasn't all darkness. For a little while, there was actually hope, a time of real reform, of stability. He was even happy. And it was all because of one person, his first wife, Anastasia. But when she died, well, that's when the last bit of light in Ivan seemed to go out for good. I mean, the difference in his reign is just staggering. It's like two different people. For 13 years, with Anastasia by his side, Ivan was a genuinely good ruler. He modernized the army, created new laws, expanded Russia's borders. They say she was the only one who could calm his infamous rages. But after she died suddenly in 1560, that good period was over. The reign of terror began. The man that was left, he was a completely different animal.
Ivan's grief just instantly curdled into suspicion. He was dead certain the boyars had poisoned his wife to hurt him. But was this just the ravings of a paranoid mind? Or was he right? For hundreds of years, nobody knew. It was just a historical mystery. Until modern science got involved and they opened up the royal tombs.
And what they found is just unbelievable. When scientists finally examined Anastasia's hair and bones in the 20th century, they found huge amounts of mercury. I'm not talking a little bit. We're talking 32 times the lethal dose. So, get this. The paranoia that launched a reign of terror, the suspicion that tore his country apart, it might have been completely justified.
So with Anastasia gone, and his worst fears seemingly confirmed, Ivan basically let his inner demons take over the country. He packed up, left Moscow, and set up this bizarre, terrifying fortress where he wasn't just a king, he was like the high priest of a death cult.
He started calling himself the Iron Abbot, and his oprichniki killers became his monks. And their daily schedule was something out of a nightmare. It would start at 4 a.m., with hours of intense prayer, Ivan literally banging his head on the stone floor in devotion. Then, a massive feast. And how did the day end? In the torture chambers, where the abbot himself would dream up new ways to execute traitors. It was this insane mix of extreme piety and pure sadism.
And if you want to see the absolute peak of this madness, look no further than the city of Novgorod. Based on a flimsy rumor that the city might switch allegiances, Ivan marched his army not against an enemy, but against his own people. For 5 straight weeks, thousands of men, women, and children were systematically tortured and thrown into the freezing river to drown.
And who stopped him? Incredibly, the only person who could get through to him was a so-called holy fool, a kind of religious outsider who people believe spoke with the voice of God. This guy, Nicholas Salos, just walks right up to the most feared man in Russia and shames him in public. Anyone else would have been killed instantly. But Ivan, terrified of God's wrath, actually turned his army around and left. It's just a perfect example of the bizarre contradictions rattling around in his head. Ivan's rage had destroyed his enemies, terrorized his own country, and left it crippled. But his final and most tragic act of violence would destroy the one thing he was supposedly building all this for: his own dynasty.
It all came crashing down one night in 1581. Ivan sees his pregnant daughter-in-law and decides her dress is too immodest, so he starts beating her. His son, the heir to the throne, also named Ivan, jumps in to protect his wife. They argue, and in a blind flash of rage, the Tsar swings his heavy, iron-tipped staff and hits his own son in the head. The moment it connects, the rage vanishes, replaced by pure horror. But it was too late. He held his dying son for days, screaming, "I have killed my son!" He had just erased his own future.
Ivan never recovered. He spent his last years lost in guilt and prayer, a totally broken man. But the shadow he cast over Russia, well, that was long and very, very dark. His whole model of absolute power, built on sheer terror, would become the playbook for leaders to come. And here's a wild little detail that really shows you just how deep his paranoia ran. He was secretly writing letters to Queen Elizabeth I of England. He proposed a pact, basically saying, hey, if either of us gets overthrown, we can come hide out in the other's country. He even asked to marry one of her relatives. The all-powerful Tsar of Russia was secretly planning an escape route. And this is maybe the most important part of his story. Future Russian leaders didn't look back at Ivan and see a madman to avoid. They saw a role model. Peter the Great looked at Ivan and admired how he crushed the old nobles to modernize the country. And then, hundreds of years later, Joseph Stalin saw Ivan as a kindred spirit, a leader who wasn't afraid to liquidate his enemies.
This quote from Stalin will send a shiver down your spine. He said, Ivan wasn't terrible enough. He thought Ivan's mistake was being too soft and not killing off all his enemies. Stalin literally used Ivan the Terrible's legacy to justify his own purges and his own totalitarian state. He twisted Ivan's brutality into a necessary tool for building a powerful nation.
Which really brings us to the big, uncomfortable question that Ivan's life leaves us with. He absolutely forged a nation, but he did it with torture and terror. He laid the groundwork for a huge empire, but also for a centuries-long tradition of autocracy and fear. So it makes you wonder, is tyranny sometimes the necessary price for what some people call national greatness? That's the question Russia and the whole world is still wrestling with.